And you obviously mentioned you read a couple of books to get into like the data and the business aspect of things. Do you have any recommendations for any people
I got
for
really
what
into
books?
copywriting. So, like,
Copywriting. Okay.
I got Dan Kennedy. I read everything of his. So he has a bunch. I can't remember the names anymore. But he's kind of gimmicky. So, like, he's got a style that isn't my style.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but he's a really good copywriter in the sense that his principles still stand. So, having 7 calls to action, using bullet points, entering the conversation that's already happening in the mind of the prospect, like some of those principles still apply. So, Dan Kennedy, all his stuff. There's a guy named Ray Edwards that has a book that called Copy That Sells. That's another good book. How to Win Friends and Influence People is a good book.
I love that
Traction.
book.
Yeah, that's my favorite one. So I mean,
Yeah.
that's the best one by far, right? You can't compete with the best. But
Right.
um, yeah, so Copy That Sells, Dan Kennedy, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Traction by Gino Wickman is the structure that I use to format the businesses, and that's been really helpful for creating organizational structure, especially like the accountability chart. Like the org chart is a super underutilized tool in businesses because what it does is it tells you like not just that these are the people in the business, but these are the roles and the systems that need to exist in the business. So if you're creating
Mm-hmm.
something new, you go and say, okay, so marketing in this way needs to happen based off of like the vision and where we're going and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so there needs to be somebody for this, somebody for this, somebody for this. And maybe I'm not hiring them out now, but I'll hire them out 3 months down the road. So it gives you like a very clear path of like who you need to hire, what the role is going to be, what the systems are, or like when I say systems, I mean like processes, like what are
Right.
the processes that they're going to be doing, all that kind of stuff. So Traction is a really, really good book. I think there's 2 books that people should definitely read if they're just starting with a business. One is E-Myth. Have you read that?
I have not. No.
Okay, that's a really good one. So that's like a conceptual one. That's not
Okay.
like hard tactics. But that
Mm-hmm.
one's really good because it gives you like the concepts of how to build a business. And it's
Mm-hmm.
basically like you build everything like off of systems and processes and it's repeatable. And that's kind of
Understood.
like at a very high level what it is. Also gives you a lot of other good stuff. But
And who is the author for that book?
I can't remember, man.
Okay. But you
I was
said it's
just thinking about
E-Myth,
that.
right? Like
Yeah.
email, like E-Myth.
So it's EMYTH.
Correct.
Um,
Okay.
yeah. So the entrepreneurial myth.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you can find it on Amazon. It's a super popular book.
Okay.
The second book that I recommend everybody that's a new entrepreneur to read is Traction, which is the actual tactics to implement the concepts of E-Myth. So it's giving you the tools and the ideas. And like I sucked at all of that stuff for a long time and I still have a long ways to grow, but it takes time. So like you just try to implement it and it's going to get better the more and more you do it, the years that you do it and all that kind of stuff. But those are 2 really good books as well. Let's see what else has been really impactful. The Lean Startup, don't read the whole thing unless you're
Mm-hmm.
like a SaaS business or a software business, but there's one chapter in there called MVP, I think, and
Okay.
it's just minimum viable product. So it's just like people oftentimes go way too in depth with developing their way too much depth with developing their product rather than just starting with like what is the minimum viable product and then selling it, getting feedback from the customer, and based on the feedback of the customer making adjustments to your product. But what people end up usually doing is they start like just developing a product and they think of like, oh, what about this, what about that, what about this,
Mm-hmm.
and they end up optimizing the shit out of it, but they're
Mm-hmm.
optimizing it all in the wrong direction. You as a computer guy
Correct.
would understand that, right? Like it's a
Yes.
total waste of time if you build like the wrong stuff for 2 weeks, right?
Right.
And so it's much better just to get started, get feedback, and then keep on pivoting and working in the direction that the customer truly wants.
Mm-hmm.
And like, don't waste all these months or however much time optimizing the thing that shouldn't be optimized, this thing that shouldn't exist. And so MVP, I think, is a really important concept if you're developing any sort of product, whether it's a SaaS or a service or hardware, whatever.
Mm-hmm. Is that something that you implemented in your own business? Like, what would be? I would say, what would be one of the biggest lessons from all the books that you read? What was the biggest lesson that you implemented that had the biggest impact on whether it be relationship building or data? Uh, Yeah.
Yeah, I can't say. I mean, I can't say that like a book has necessarily like it's too hard to grab like one concept that I said
Okay.
would say that this had the
Hmm.
biggest impact. But I think as of the last like 2 years, 3 years, the biggest impact for sure has been just the relationship orientation and like giving relentlessly, like generosity.
Hmm.
And because what it does is it creates a more attractive and better version of yourself. It actually refines your character that other people are then attracted